Today is going to be such a special episode and conversation. I am sharing with all of you someone who has guided me since 2020. Like, I can't even really explain what my life was fully like in 2020 and what it looks like now and how bright it is now. I am so delighted, and it's such an honor to introduce all of you to Sheryl Netzky. Sometimes you might hear me refer to her as an energy healer or a shaman, or sometimes I might even refer to her as a spiritual teacher. It's a way that I try to share my experiences and what I've learned and how I've evolved, but still honor her in a way that all of you can hear a little bit of you. So today, I hope that this conversation does just that you hear a little bit of what you need so that you know, no matter where you are in life's journey, that healing is offered to you from yourself, which is the wildest thing about it. And Cheryl's here to tell us a little bit about her work and her own story. So with that, I want to say welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you, Terry. It's a real honor and pleasure and gift to be with you.
It's just like so much fun. Like, I love telling my friends when, someone looks at me and they're like, "You look so good. Like, you are glowing." And I'm like, "Oh, let me tell you how I got here." I always refer to my time in meeting you because for me, it truly was this tipping point. I knew what I wanted to do, kind of knew the steps I needed to take to accomplish it, but hadn't really resolved the how, the why, or even like letting go a little bit of guilt and shame to take that first step to take action. A lot of times we know we want to, change our life. We know exactly what we want to do, but we don't know how to take that first step. And so I'll never forget the first call we had. I was on my kitchen table, my old house. I was married, and I'd actually gotten your information in June, but I just started a new job. And I was like, there's no way I could take on another thing. But I still, something said, have a conversation with you. So we had a conversation where you share with me your work and what you did. And it wasn't until that next November when I said, I am ready, there's space, and I have a need. So little did I know that saying that I had a need and accepting your invitation was the first step. But I said a whole lot there, and I want people to hear about you and your work from you. So if you don't mind, can we start a little bit talking about your roots, your background, your credentials, so people can hear the full spectrum of who you are before we get into how you do your work and what you do every day?
Sure. Yeah. So I was born and raised in the North Shore suburbs of Chicago. And I usually tell people I went to the high school that Breakfast Club is said to be written about.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I guess I share that because it was a very competitive environment academically and socially. And that is my best guess at why Northwestern University put a stress management clinic in our media center, which were called libraries back in the day.
Well,
And yeah. And so in our gym class as a 14-year-old in ninth grade, our gym teacher walked us up to the media center, and there was this little tiny room, and inside it there were black lazy boy chairs and Sony Walkman and a biofeedback machine. And the tapes were really interesting. It was progressive muscle relaxation, so learning how to tense a muscle and relax a muscle, and a really just very base form of meditation. Like you're going down the elevator, you're on the 10th floor, going down to the ninth floor. And it was simple. But what I saw was that we were hooked up to, you could hook yourself up to kind of like the equivalent of a modern pulse ox machine. So you could see, and I saw at that very young age of 14, that my thoughts affected my physiology.
yes, that is insane. That there was a whole research center in your high school, but it
I,
was,
yeah, I don't know that it was a research center. That is my best guess. The
yeah,
suicide rate in my high school was quite high because of the academic and social competition in the area. Like
wow,
you could have a 4.0 and not be in the top 10% of the class. It was very rigorous. It was a
wow.
school, but very rigorous. Yeah.
But I love that, you had an awareness at even a young age of 14 to understand what you were listening to was like lowering your stress levels. Like you exactly knew how it was impacting your physiology. I mean, that is something that I didn't learn until I was like 42 from you.
Yeah. Yeah, see how like one spark, somebody having that idea at Northwestern University and putting that, like who would have thought to put in lazy boy recliners and give us Sony Walkman and pre-record guided muscle relaxation and meditation tapes and let us see the physiology and how it affects us would have this many ripple effects. But that just shows each one of us really, right? How
Yeah.
much we listen to that God voice, that place inside of us, that something aligns and something is whispering to us
Mm.
to take action on it and how much it can spread and help other people.
That's incredible. And so you had a career of helping people, but in so many different avenues. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it's
Yeah.
a story that I love hearing you tell.
Yeah. Yeah. So my first career was in education, and I taught almost every grade, preschool through graduate school, but mostly locked myself in a room with other people's 150 other people's teenagers,
Yeah.
which I loved, who I loved. And I taught AP English. So I was a reading and writing teacher. I sat on a board at the county level for wound up being around 20 years total, teaching teachers how to teach reading and writing from a place of being real readers and writers ourselves. And so my goal as a public school educator was never, I didn't necessarily care that my students read the assigned books that were really limited to what the school had resources for to have in our book room. What I cared was that my students had the skills and ability to read, write, or speak anything that they needed or wanted to read, write, or speak in their lives. So that's a little bit of my background. Yeah. And eventually I then wound up studying and training in yoga. I became just deeply curious about yoga 25 or 30 years. It was about 29 years ago was when I took my first yoga class. And then I eventually found that things were healing in my own body that made no academic sense. And I was a University of Michigan undergrad and graduate school academic student. So I was used to things making academic sense.
Yeah.
Yoga was a place where I could breathe and move. And I started understanding that I had more real estate that I could live in, that there was
Mm.
more real estate than just up in my head and the cognition, that we could actually feel and sense what was happening in our own liver, that we could feel and sense what was happening in our hip. We could feel and sense what was happening in our left toes. And I started really living into that embodied space at that time and getting deeply curious about how breathing and moving was healing things in my body that nothing else was
Yeah.
working on. So I studied and trained as a yoga instructor back then, not because I really wanted to be a yoga instructor, but because it was the first time I felt like an engineer where I wanted to take something apart and understand how it worked. And of course, you really can't take apart yoga and understand how it works. Like you could take apart a car or you could take apart a fence or a small motor. But you do learn a lot in the process of trying to figure it out.
Well, let's just unpack that a little bit because you
Yeah.
said some profound things. One thing that I realized while you were talking is your career took you back to high school, which is where you had that initial spark with high performing students because you took AP students. And
Right.
how wild is that? Like
Right.
beautiful manifestation that just anyone who I'm sure people that are watching and even listening, like your presence is so calming in itself, like for those students to have that gift and for you to receive their gift of just how curious their minds are and like how they were processing information. Because
Yeah.
now, one thing that I love about you is you're such a practical teacher because you can take these ideas and concepts and then
Mhm.
distill them into a way someone can learn and immediately take action. And so I thought of that petri dish of all these things that were coming together for you as you laid that out. But the other thing that I want to just talk about a little bit, you said something that was so profound. You said that you discovered that there was more real estate than what was just in your head.
Yes.
Well, it's a beautiful line. It's like the title of an essay. But there's so many people that are listening that might not even understand what that means. So I do want for us in a little bit to go back to that. But I think if you explain what happened when you were teaching yoga and you would touch people, that would begin to tell the story about what that means.
Yeah. So as I shared, I wasn't really intending to become a yoga instructor. I already had a master's degree in education. I was teaching at best practice conferences nationally. I had a wonderful set of mentors inside of education who had lifted me onto a board to sit with them at age 23. And they were 20 years my senior. Many of them are still very close friends to this day. Many of them are professors at different universities. Amazing, wise, kind, grounded, spiritual
Yeah.
souls. Yeah. And I really wasn't planning to change careers. But if I kind of go backwards to go forwards, when we talk about that meditation experience that I had in high school, when I graduated from high school, people ask you when you graduate, like, oh, what are you going to major in? I would tell people, I'm going to major in stress management and therapy.
That's wild.
And they would say, oh, can you major in that? I didn't know that there was a major in that. And I said, well, I'm going to University of Michigan and I've heard you can make your own major. So I'm just going to make my own major.
I love it.
And of course you can't, it wasn't exactly that you could make your own major. You could specialize, you could tweak things a little bit. But, so I wound up with a psychology and English degree were my majors. But moving forward, somebody asked me to substitute teach their yoga class after I had gone through yoga teacher training. I did 2 8 or 9 month periods because I had birthed some of my sons. I was pregnant with one of my sons during one of the times. I have 3 sons. And somebody asked me if I would just sub their class. And so I did. And I was really worried that I would forget the sequence of poses. So it's when you're teaching like an Ashtanga class, or there's a sequence to the poses. It's not just haphazard that you flow through. So I was worried that it was going to look like a very bad game of Twister, like right hand here and left foot here, and that the whole thing would be all kind of janged. And instead, what ended up happening was after class, one woman came up and said, how did you do that? And I didn't know what she was talking about. And she said that she had had pain in her left ovary for 6 months. And I had touched her hip to adjust her pose, and that the pain went away when my hands were there and I was breathing and holding space for her body and adjusting her. And I kind of just shrugged it off as like, oh, that's odd. And then somebody else in class came up, and it was a gentleman, and he was older, and he said, you don't know this about me, but my wife passed away 6 months ago, and I have been in a deep depression. And when you put your hand behind my heart and I folded forward in that pose, it was the first time I felt the depression lift. How
Wow.
do you do that?
Hey, y'all, it's Terri. Transformation doesn't happen by accident. It's a daily practice. And Best Self Co. gives you the tools to live with purpose. From guided journals to productivity decks, every product is designed to help you dream bigger, reflect deeper, and take aligned action. Visit Best Self Co. and use the code Terri for 15% off. Your next breakthrough starts with one small step, and today is a beautiful day to begin.
And again, it was like a sequence of things like this that kept happening that I couldn't ignore. And I began to understand that there was something that I was doing. And in hindsight, if I put it all together, it was kind of a series of things. It was everything from the being trained in yoga at age 14, or being trained in meditation at age 14. I knew how to go to stillness really quickly. And I saw physiologically, I had an understanding that it wasn't pretend.
Yeah.
And physiologically real happening in my body when I did that. And then from teaching, and especially when you teach middle school, I taught middle school in an area that had third generation gangs, which means that the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter are all in the same gang. And it's pretty horrific when you learn about what had to happen in order for them to be initiated and what has to happen in order for anybody to get out of the gang. So I had had those kind of initiatory experiences and taught a lot in high school. And what teaching in middle school or high school teaches you is people talk about, oh, teachers have eyes in the back of their head. It's
Oh,
like,
I with my mother, so I know.
yes, yes,
Facts.
right? So you probably grew up with your mom sensing something, yeah,
For
that was
sure.
inexplicable.
Still does.
Oh, how did
What are you talking about?
right, right. So in that place that necessity is the mother of invention, when you're teaching in a high school, if you there's an artistry to there's a science to it and an artistry to it that if you want to keep the conversation and dialogue going in the class about something rich and meaningful where students can really learn and gain and build awareness and discover things together, you have to learn how to sense what's happening all over the room. Otherwise,
Yeah.
student A is going to shoot a spitball at, student C across the room and is going to be distracting people. But if you kind of just you learn to sense the hot spots in the
Yeah.
room and you learn to just go and gently like place a hand right on Johnny's desk before he's going to throw that spitball. And you don't have to say anything. You don't have to disrupt the conversation. You can just place your hand there and Johnny knows that you see him, even if you're not looking at him. Right. So like teachers gain that sense out of necessity. Like you learn that if you don't have a sense of where everybody is in the room and what the dynamics are between the different people, the different learners in the room, somebody might crawl up onto your 10-foot cabinets, little break time. And, then you're going to be missing a student, which actually did happen once. Yeah. Well, I think it was a combination of, in hindsight, when I look back at how did I learn to see energy? How did I learn to sense energy? How was this happening with people in their poses? What was actually happening? And I think it was a combination of the stillness and being able to hold a place of stillness inside myself with what we can call the light, consciousness, spirit, God, divine, whatever we want to call it. But being able to find that place at the ready inside oneself.
Yeah.
And then a combination of really kind of just a fascinating harvest of life experiences, everything from going shopping with my father. My father, his grandparents were costume designers in Europe, and his mother was a dress designer. And he would take me shopping. And from 3 racks over, I would hold up a sweater and he would say, oh, put that down. It has Angora in it. It's going to make you itch. Or I'd pick up something else. He's like, no, that's 65% this, 35% this. It's going to ball up. It's not going to hold well. But my father could do that from across the room. He could sense the sheen of a satin versus a taffeta, or like he just had that awareness and he trained my eye. But I had no idea I was learning to see energy from any of that. I just was shopping with my dad because it was fun and joyful.
It's so cool, but I love the way you told those stories because I want people to understand, like, you don't have to have a pedigree or be special to do this work. Of course, there's training. Of course, there's a lot of work that you put into this.
Yes.
You have the ability to find your center and stillness. Anyone can access that. And I feel like that's one of the biggest gifts that I've learned from you. And even though I've been a student now for 6 years, some days it's still hard to find that center and stillness, you know? And so I think this is a great place for us to shift. I want to talk about a little bit about where I was when I found your work and how I found it. And then going into, what it is and how you help people.
Yes.
So I go to the hair salon. Everybody knows this every week. So I'm at the hair salon and get a phone call from another lobbyist. I only had one interaction with her, and it was a pretty tense interaction. We were on opposite sides of a policy issue, and someone in the room was putting us against each other. But we both had the sense to use emotional intelligence and say, like, oh, I see you. I see you. Like, we'll talk later, And so it was a very classy interaction, even though it was tense. And there were like 100 people in the room. And so afterwards, we had an exchange and a laugh, and we were like, oh, both of our companies have female CEOs. Let's get them together. And our CEOs, not they both weren't female. Let's get them together. Let's keep in touch. Then out of the blue, like 2 years later, she calls my phone and she tells me she's working with this woman and it's been incredible work for her. And after her last session, she had a vision of me dancing on the beach. And she just felt like she needed to tell me about this work. Now, at this point, I think I might have had like one medium reading, but like I didn't really know, what a shaman was, what energy work was. But I do remember at a young age hearing things and just kind of having knowings. And I immediately started crying. I'm under the hair, like under the hair dryer with like foils crying.
Mhm.
But I'm also like this tough cookie, because I was so tense and holding so many feelings. Like, um, I don't know if you remember this, Cheryl, but I was like, I'm more of a boy than a girl, was
Mhm.
presenting very masculine. And I'm like crying at the hair salon. But it was because I had that picture of me. It was a physical picture. It really happened. I had it, yet it was a vision she saw, and it didn't live on Facebook, like a vision she saw. So I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. You know, couldn't explain it, but I was so compelled to learn more because there's absolutely no reason this girl would have this vision of me, a picture that I held and that I loved. And so I gave you a call, but at that point in life, I, you know, just began recovery of a concussion. I think I might have been a little over a year and a half after a concussion, a major concussion, had just started a new job, was starting to think about getting divorced, just knew some things had to change, but didn't know like where to begin. And you told me, you said, okay, you're thinking about getting divorced. Don't do that until we work together. And I was like, okay, we can talk about this. But it was
Mhm.
as if you knew there was this resolve that needed to happen within me before I could even talk about it. And even though it took me months,
Mhm.
it was one of those reasons why I said yes. I felt seen. I felt like you understood. And within 15 minutes, I already felt connected to you. And so it was so clear that you really have a gift. And so I want you just to really talk about the work that you do and put the words on it that you use to talk about it, but the things that I truly value is, there are 3 or 4 things that we're all working on, and you're able to identify that and then accelerate people's journeys. This is how I explain it to a manner where they can create change. So I laugh with my friends. I'm like, you guys are going to therapy and nothing's getting resolved. But in one session, there's so much work that I can do. And
Mhm.
I feel good after. I feel like I've really accomplished something great. And I don't say great in in an award or trophy sense, but like in a way that something has moved within me.
It's a beautiful honoring and beautiful share of your own journey, and of course, with your humor and wit embedded inside it, which I love. First, I really appreciate that you shine a light on that this is something that everybody can do. Not saying I don't want to. I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting that everybody can go out there and practice shamanic energy work or practice energy work on other people without it having really deep, rich, rooted training. However, what I hear you suggesting and what I also agree 100% with is that we all have the capacity. Not one of us came in without intuition or instincts. We can call it instinct, we can call it intuition, we can call it a gut read, a gut sense, we can call it the God place, we can call it, I just have this feeling about it. But not one of us came in without that. Now, due to trauma or life experiences, the currents of those knowings can get blocked or inverted, and we can lose some of our access to it, but it is always there like the sun behind the clouds. It's never not there. It's just our ability to access it. And every one of us comes equipped knowing how to access it and with a life journey that will lead us back to it if we let it.
If we let it.
Yeah, if we let it. So it's like, well, why would any of us not want to go back to that place when there's so much joy? Or think about all the moments in any of our lives that are just so challenging, right? Why wouldn't we want that steadying place of something bigger than ourselves that is also self, that is something that we can steady inside of and find a still place in? Of course we want that.
Yes.
But why does it become so hard for all of us? Like, I've been practicing meditation for a good number of decades, over 40 years now. And it's still on certain days, it's like if meditation was that easy, everybody on the planet would be doing it every day. So it's not to say that every day it's easy to go and access that, but it is to say that it's like a muscle, that the more we practice it, the more we get used to riding in on that inward current to connect with that source place inside ourselves and to be able to root down and realize that we have something bigger than ourselves to stand with inside that place and that can guide us. And we can talk about it in all different frames of life. Like Steven Spielberg talks about it as whispers, like hearing the whispers. It's like, well, why do we stop listening to the whispers? Because I think everybody who's listening to this call, and I know myself, and likely you might too, have moments that we've all not listened. We've heard something,
Absolutely.
right? But we haven't abided in that place. And then we watch what unfolds in our life. And we're generally not too happy with how that unfolded. And yet it's part of the life experience that we forget to listen, we forget to see, we forget to connect in, and then we remember, and then we remember, and then we remember.
Yeah, you brought me back to, just a couple of weeks before my concussion, I was driving home and talking to my mom and telling her that I kept hearing car crashes in my head. And my brother was driving 45 minutes to work and home every day. So I was like, tell him to chill out on the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge, which is the longest bridge in the country, I think. And my mom was like, you're worried about your brother. You're the one driving. So there's two things there, right? The first is, had I taken the time to be still or had the knowledge to be still, I might have picked up on what was happening.
Yeah.
But second, my mom was reminding me of an even greater lesson. You're worried about him and what's over there, but you really need to be connected with self, you know? And so there was two ways I could have learned that lesson. So, but of course, weeks later, when I didn't listen to my intuition, I get hit in the head because right before it, I knew to move. I just didn't move far over enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to describe what is possible if we're willing to listen and to do the work and connecting to self. But I'd love for you to even go a little deeper so people can get a sense if they were to call you and say, my life's a mess. I need your help to clean this up.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does working with a shaman mean? What does working with a teacher? What can people expect if they were to give you a call?
Yeah. So my work is a combination of what I've learned through shamanism, which for me is really the awareness that there is an aliveness to all life, that there is an aliveness inside every human. There's an aliveness inside every animal, the dogs, the birds, the insects. There's an aliveness inside of the trees, the plants, our flowers. There's an aliveness inside the air, the clouds, the sun. There's an aliveness inside of all of life. So I want to just first presence my teachers that taught me that. I had very skillful teachers that I studied with for many, many years. I apprenticed even after I had my master's degree in education. I apprenticed for many years inside of energy medicine work, and became a lead teacher for that teacher's company and so forth. Come back to the question of, what does it look like for somebody when they're working with me? I mostly work one-on-one, right? One to couples or one to groups, or I go into companies, organizations, nonprofits, families, and help to create more peaceful protocols and practices in places of friction and conflict. So sometimes somebody's coming exactly like you said and say, "Hey, my life is not working. It's, I'm in the hot mess space." And
It's
suffer,
always hot, HAUT.
right? Yeah. And, when any of us are there, we're suffering. Like that's the bottom line is we're suffering. So my work is to, I'm trained to track like a jaguar tracks through the jungle, the scent of something. So I'm tracking at the literal physical and at the emotional, cognitive, behavioral, at the spiritual soul level and at the energetic level. And then I'm assessing what does that person, how can I serve? Like, is this work a good fit for this person? And if not, refer them to who I think might be a good fit. And if it is a good fit, how can I serve best this person in the shortest amount of time to get the biggest amount of benefit for the person's life to begin to, sometimes they're called destiny derailments. And it's an interesting phrase that one of my teachers, Alberto Vialdo, coined the phrase like destiny retrieval, I believe, or destiny derailment. And what it basically means is like we're on a trajectory, but we haven't listened to the whispers long enough that we've made things that are really a no, a yes. So we may have married somebody that we knew internally in our gut something wasn't right.
Pointing us out. It's okay to call myself out, right?
Yeah. And then we
I'm sure I'm not alone.
alone. You are alone. And the space of, that how amazing life is that it will still bring us right back home to ourselves. Whether it's through the pain and suffering of having chosen something that pulled us off they don't talk about destiny as like a one fixed star in the sky. It's more like a constellation map. It's more, this is my analogy for it. I guess.
It
It's
makes
like,
sense though.
yeah, it's more like a series of destinations. Every choice that we make is leading us into a different set of destinations, like a different constellation of our life map, like a tree with different branches. That if a tree only grows on one side, it's going to be a lopsided tree, but the tree has to grow on both sides, right? For it to have balance. And yet the top is still going to be pointed and look different than the bottom of the tree. Doesn't mean the tree didn't grow right if the branches are a little bit crooked or they go this way or they go that way. It's just part of what makes a whole human life. So
Love all of this stuff. I can just see you all day. Oh my gosh. This episode was for me, not for everybody else.
yeah. So kind of bring me back around what it looks like to work together is that I can feel and sense what's happening in somebody else's system remotely and be able to affect change in it remotely. So I'm generally doing an intro chat with somebody, getting an assessment of what is needed and if it's a good fit for the work, and then setting up a series of calls that are usually an hour and a half to 2 hours in length. And we work either via phone or via video. Or if the situation is really embedded in the physiology, if somebody is going through, like I've had nurses or doctors call me that are facing a medical diagnosis that they know they're educated enough to know where they're headed and they're about to go into the next appointment and they don't want that label ticket punched onto their soul being. And so then we do work. And what that means, it's so hard to talk about this work. Every time we get close to it, you'll hear I go like out bigger.
You're doing great. This is so good.
Yeah. And it's because the work is so amorphous in a way, or it is intentionally not in a form. So my belief structure is that we all are light embodied in a form. And that light in me is the same light in you, is the same light in everybody that's listening to this podcast. So that light does not have a form until it's imbibed in a form of creation. So when we're talking about state shifting something, out of a form. So if somebody has a pre-diagnosis for an autoimmune disorder, when one has training and skill and has practiced enough, they can go into a field and be able to help that person release that from the field. So when people say, "Oh, you heal people," no, I help people do their healing work.
Well, and I can share my stories. That's allowed, right? But I remember when I first got Raynaud's, and that was how I was taught to say it, because there are tons of different ways to say it. That is an autoimmune disorder. I told you, and you're like, I can help you with that. So you did some work, or I should say, we did some work. It's because based off
Yeah,
of what you just said,
yeah,
and yes, for 6 months, it was gone.
yeah,
And it came back once like, I shouldn't say stress myself out. Once situations changed in life, I'm going to
yeah,
give myself some grace there. Um, but when I focused on really getting back and focused, on my health, doing my spiritual practices, I've been able to manage it. And I don't think it's because of energy work. It's because I'm doing my practices and being emotionally intelligent and staying grounded and working out. But it's true. For a very long time, I didn't have any issues. I didn't even need to wear gloves outside.
yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, yeah. And I think everybody who loves what they do thinks that they have the best job on the planet. And I'm one of those people who thinks I have the best job on the planet because I get to witness miracles every day.
Yes, I love that. It's so
Yeah,
true. I
yeah.
in my own life. I am a walking miracle.
Yeah, we all are, right? Yeah. Yeah. So in this place, so for some people, it's a physiological thing, like an autoimmune disorder, that we want to lift out of the field so that it doesn't take more hold in the physiology. We can actually shift it the same way that I think it's every 7 years we grow a new body, right? So what makes us think that we can't do some of that intentional shifting in our own form? I've seen people who the doctor was certain that they had liver cancer, and they go to have the biopsy, and the doctor's taking out cell after cell, and there's no liver cancer. Uh,
Wow, that's insane.
yeah, and a client of mine that's given me permission to share about this, last spring, I had the opportunity to present at MIT for a group called Gathering of Titans, and it's a lot of very high achieving entrepreneurs that were in the room. And this client is also a very high achieving entrepreneur and presenter in the world. And he had started collapsing in hotel rooms from pain in his back that was so severe that he was really concerned that he would lose his livelihood and that he would lose this whole quality of life. He was concerned about how he would parent his children, how he would be a spouse to a spouse, all of the things. And it happened not just in one hotel room in one city away from home. It happened in 3 different hotel rooms in 3 different cities, where he wound up in 3 different emergency rooms, where in every emergency room, they gave him an MRI, they hooked him up to an IV, they gave him painkillers. And he was really concerned about not wanting to get addicted to painkillers,
Yes.
not knowing how to function in life. So in that situation, I flew out to work with that situation in person. And when I arrived, his pain level was at a 9 out of 10. Within 12 hours, the pain level had dropped to a 0 or 1 out of 10. And then I stayed for 3 more days to teach him the skills, tools, and resources to be able to manage it himself, which involved a lot of life changes. The invitation was to gift himself a bit of a sabbatical, a 3-month sabbatical, which I really strongly encourage for many of us, that if there's a way to work it out, a lot of times, like, the mind can't hold, I'm
Yeah.
just not at work. But if you say, like, I'm gifting myself a sabbatical time because something's gotten derailed in my destiny, or I'm in need of soul retrieval time. I need to get the parts of the light of me that have, due to trauma or fear or being judged or whatever it is that's happened to us in our life, parts of that light body can go out of the body, like being scared out of our skin. We talk about that, like somebody's been in a bad accident. Oh, they've been shocked out of their skin. But what if that actually happens? What if the luminous energy part of us can actually go AWOL? and say, I'm out of this place. Like this life gig, too much for me. I'm out.
And I've learned a little bit of us does do that. At times we leak or we leave, like,
Yes.
so yes, I that's such an incredible story.
Yeah. So part of my work is the training to go into the less visible planes of perception, find the light force energy that is that person and help that person restore that back inside themselves. And also because my background is really in teaching, a lot of my work is training people in meditative journey states to be able to bring that home themselves over and over and over again. Yeah, and that's where it's broken down when we're talking about, like, because of my teaching background, I look at it in terms of I don't want people to become dependent on me for the work. I want them to have the tools, skills, and resources. And frankly, life is such a journey that we will always want to grow and learn ourselves. We could still have sessions every day and still learn something more and come into more restored balance. I have plenty of work. But how can each person learn the skills, tools, and resources? Because that's the world I want to leave to our children's children. And
Yeah.
yeah, so teaching people simple skills.
Well, I do want to ask a couple of questions before we close. There's so many people that I just yesterday and again earlier this morning, I was telling a friend that, they needed to work with you, sent over the Google website link, but now I can just send them this podcast. So fun. But, a lot of people might be stuck at a place where they're like, I'm religious. I don't know if this works for me. Or
Yes.
I don't believe, my own mother would probably say, like, I'm Catholic. I don't believe in this. What are you doing? Talk to God. Can
Right.
you share, like, what is your belief?
Mm,
I've even asked that question when we first started. And,
yeah.
how do you walk someone through that internal conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first place is that I don't have a conflict inside myself and hold every religion with so much respect for that person's belief. And my agenda is never to rewrite over somebody else's beliefs. My intent is to be in respect and in rapport with that person's belief system and structure of what they believe and allowing them to come home deeper and deeper, because whether we call it Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or Moses or Isaac or Abraham, wherever Ishmael, if we, go to Islam, if we go to any of the belief structures, there's still a sense of that light, the formlessness of consciousness being imbibed in a form. So for me, there's a root that is the same. And I'm also I've studied deeply with a Sanskrit scholar. I've studied inside of Christian mysticism. I've studied inside of Kabbalah. I've studied inside of the indigenous roots, which is what we've been referring to as shamanic energy. And in that, the form of that I've studied is mostly from Peru. And it's really about indigeneity is like that place of remembering that we all come from the same roots. We all eventually trace it back far enough, and we all are indigenous, but we don't all remember our indigenous aliveness of life of all things, or the world wouldn't look like how it looks right now. Kind of circling back to the religion question, I guess one example would be in a client that had a dear client in Austin, actually, where he had a dear friend who was a well-known musician, and the musician had a stage 4 form of cancer and was in hospice and had his very fundamental religion, Christianity beliefs that, and his church, people from his church were helping with the hospice care, helping his family. So they were there around the clock. And my client wanted to gift this musician. We'll just give the musician a name. Terry, pick a name for us. We'll pick a name. John? Okay.
Yeah.
So the musician who we've named John, um, John's family very much was on board with me going out there to help him in whatever ways I could. The living and dying consciously process are very similar. what we need to do to live consciously is very similar to what we need to do to die consciously. And we all have an expiration date.
Mm.
But how do we leave having repaired any relationships? How do we finish any unfinished business, which is hard for all of us? Like, that's the life journey, right? So his family was on board, but the people from his church were very concerned because they heard the word shaman. And even for me, when I started this work, that word was really scary for me. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it was outside of my own religious beliefs that I was born into and raised with. I didn't know. I just knew that something inside of it sensed very true to me, authentic, and felt real and didn't feel scary. It felt peaceful.
Yes.
So my client called me up as I've got my bag packed. I'm walking to my car to load it up and drive to the airport. And he calls me up and says, "Hey, just letting you know that some of the folks from the church are a bit concerned. Not sure if they're going to let you in once you get here, but don't worry about it." I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" He's get in the car and get on the plane and come out. And I think once they just meet you, everything's going to be all right. And that's kind of what happened as we drove over there. And there were 3 members of the church who deeply loved this man. And his mother and sister were there, who were just divine beings too.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down with them and we just had a conversation and then let them ask any of their questions that they needed to ask without any attachment to doing the work and just letting them meet me. And they all signed on. They all were good.
Yeah.
And wound up doing profound work together. And he was able to clear something with his closest family member that he deeply, deeply loved, that he needed to clear something with.
Oh, that's beautiful. What a gift to
Yeah.
everyone involved, to
Yeah.
his soul, his
Yeah.
physical presence, his
Yeah.
family.
To the family member too, who's still here. Yes.
So incredible. Hey, y'all, Terri here. I am all about transformation, and that includes how we care for our bodies. That's why I love Pure Method Collagen by Dr. Dina Peralta Rake. It's clean, science backed, and made for those who want to feel radiant from the outside in. Right now, my Roots+Rebirth family gets 15% off. Just head to puremethod.co and use promo code Terri at checkout. Because rebirth starts with nourishing every part of you, inside out. If someone is listening and they're still in a place, well, none of these examples resonate, I want to drill down for them. You can help people with life pivots and career changes.
Yes.
You can help people, learn how not to be like fully connected to work, that you have forgotten about yourself. Some of the really hard things that as high achievers do. You can help someone with grief, and help people release trauma. And so I do want to share how you helped me, really release grief, and not just one time, like multiple times over the last 6 years. But most recently, I lost my grandmother in December. So now we're, about 5 months later. And I saw you, like, I think the day after or 2 days after. It was so right after. And my heart was heavy and I was telling you everything. And you know how close I was to my grandmother. And we began just to do the work. And I could tell that the grief was just kind of being released. And I was just crying. And then you asked for permission, to go even deeper. And you started talking to my grandmother. And I don't remember all the details because I was in this meditative state. We were doing some work, but, essentially the message that you gave me was that she was okay, and that we were connected and she was still very much with me and all of us and seeing everything that was happening. That's the short version of it. And so the morning after her funeral, it's like 6 a.m. and I'm hearing drum beats, boom, 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 boom. They're getting louder and they're getting faster. And I'm like, my mom has Amazon everywhere in her house, Alexa. And she's always like, Alexa, play Down South radio. So I'm like, mom left her Alexa on. So I get out of my bed, go to the bathroom, still hear them, go in the kitchen, Alexa off, still hear them. Walk by my mom's room. There's no sounds anywhere. I just still hear drums in my head.
Yeah.
So then it clicked. I'm like, I know what's going on. So I got back in the bed and I was like, Novella, I hear you. Thank you for letting me know you're okay. You made it to heaven and I need to go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And so when, we met right after she passed, you were telling me that she was preparing to find her own way to heaven and she would go when she was ready. And she indicated she wanted to do that after the funeral. So once I connect the dots, it's like, oh, okay. And you later told me like she was letting me know there was a celebration. And so the work is just so beautiful that things show up in ways that you could never explain. But now I know I have this really deep connection to my grandmother that I can access whenever I need it. And when I'm willing to do a little work and to listen, right? Because it doesn't always just come.
Yeah.
And so I hope that people hear the many invitations that have been extended along the way, that they can, do work with you and really to have transformational changes. When I
Yes.
say I feel like we have done things that I could have never done in therapy. And it makes me get really misty eyed about that. But it's just so much fun to have you share these stories and your journey and how you do this work. And so I want to let you, just share anything else that's on your heart that you might want people to know. But most importantly, I also want you to let them know how to find you.
Thank you. Thank you. The first thing that's coming, well, I'll share how to find me so that I don't forget to share that.
Because
So
that's
you, right, right. So you can find me at goodenergyheals.com. And my email is Sheryl, Sheryl, at goodenergyheals.com. The first piece that I want to share is about a youth of our times right now, the children and young adults, adolescents of our time right now, who may be struggling, who may be looking at what I've heard from many young adults, they're just the level of despair or disconnection from themselves, addiction to cell phone, to media, to social media, and the levels of despair and sadness that are happening for people in disconnect. And I want to just share that find people who are filled with light, find animals that are filled with light, go out in nature, find a group, something that interests you to be with people. And also to share that if it's useful for people, I do work with young adults and teens and children. If somebody is suicidal, whether it's an adult or a child, they need to be under medical professional care in addition to working with me. And the medical professional usually needs to sign off on it would be okay for them to do this work. We're at a time period of great transformation on the planet. There are many ways that as a culture, we've been asleep to this time period of great transformation. And we'd like to pretend it's not happening because of the uncertainty and the levels of like, well, what do we do? We know how to build things in this system. What do we do in this place now from here forward? And I remember many years ago, somebody in one of my classes when I was a student of Peruvian shamanism, somebody asked, it was like maybe 2007, and somebody asked, like, well, where are they going to be the safe places when 2012 hits? Because there are all these prophecies at that period from the Inca, from the Q'ero people, from people. There were all these prophecies, and people thought that people misunderstood the prophecies and thought that it meant that the world was ending, which wasn't what the prophecies were actually saying. They were saying that the world has been inside out, upside down. In Quechua, it's a Pachacudi, that we're in a time period where Pacha, infinite time space, Kudi, the dark ages, or the great turning over. In Sanskrit, it's more going from a Kali Yuga to a Sat Yuga, time period of the dark ages, time period of the truth. So this time period of this great turning over. And somebody asked, like, where are the safe places going to be? And I remember Alberto Villoldo got very quiet, and he said, there will be no safe places, only safe people.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
And for me, I think that's the message is, how do we each become one of them? How do we become more and more of a safe person to be in relationship with, within ourselves and with everybody else?
Wow. That is such a word. I hope people really enjoy that. And if you're listening, you do take the time just to like meditate on that, maybe journal about it. It's a great invitation for you to begin to start practicing the work that we've been talking about today. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Oh my gosh, if I could talk to you like all day, every day.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Such a treat for people to hear and learn about the work that you do, how you change people's lives. And those people then change the world, but that your work is still accessible to them. They now know how to reach you.
Yes, thank you very, very much. It's been a great gift and honor to be here with you today. And thank you for sharing your, grassroots stories of it, because it also shows people how, for many of us who lead in the world, to also hold the dignity and humility which you hold both so beautifully and so well, to be able to do that and share with transparency is such a gift, and how many people that will serve today from just hearing your stories of
No,
it. Thank you.
I feel like I have a responsibility to do that because I've truly have evolved and I was going to say feel, but I know I'm a better person today than I was 6 years ago. So
Yeah.
the smallest, the least I can do is to share those experiences so that someone else might not be afraid to take that first step or to make that phone call.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hey, y'all. Hey, before I go, a reminder that this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not professional advice. If you need medical, legal, or mental health support, please consult a qualified professional. Be sure to subscribe and follow Roots+Rebirth podcast. You can find me at Terri R. Broussard and movementmakercollective.com. Until next time, it's Terri R. Broussard. I'm cheering you on.